Welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here and submit your question, and it might be on a future episode. Let's talk about it. I'm coming to the realization that true leadership isn't about getting people to do what you want, but about getting them to want to do those things that you want done. What are some practical ways to do that as a leader in worship ministry? How do you do this in the context of leading the congregation in a worship service Sunday morning and leading the worship ministry team, your volunteers, etc.? JD. I think I'd like to rephrase that saying. I understand what you're saying, but I feel like the way that you said it is manipulative, and I don't think you meant to come across that way. But you're like, how do leading people isn't just getting them to do what I want, but getting them to want to do the things that I want. I feel like that sounds manipulative. I think the way that I would rephrase it is true leadership is getting people to understand the goal that we are trying to accomplish and doing the necessary steps to get there. I think that's how I would phrase it, because and I know you didn't mean to come off this way, but that sounds manipulative if you're like, it's not just about getting them to do what I want them to do. It's about getting them to want to do what I do. So I'll trick them into doing it. I don't think we have to trick people. It's like we lead people in that way, which I think that you're right, but we lead people in that way by getting them to understand the bigger vision of what we're doing. And in previous episodes of Real Talk, I'll use this as an example. One of the previous episodes, we talked about weekly worship rehearsals. And so this leader wanted to have weekly worship rehearsals. And the way to get people, if you don't have weekly worship rehearsals, the way to get your team to have weekly worship rehearsals and get behind that understanding is not to say, we are going to have weekly worship rehearsals now. The way to get them to do that is to say, we are going to have weekly worship rehearsals because X, Y, and Z. Because when we only meet on Sundays, we don't have much time to run through our music, so we're never improving what we're doing. When we only meet on Sunday mornings, we don't have time to do a devotional because there's a million other things that need to be done on Sunday morning, and I'm called to lead you not just musically, but also spiritually. When we only get together on Sunday mornings, we don't have time to build as deep of relationships with each other as I would like. And so, because of all these things, because we are going to focus on improving musically, because we are going to focus on the spiritual side of leading worship and not just the musical side of worship, because we are going to focus on unity as a team and building relationships with each other, we need a time outside of Sunday morning, because Sunday mornings do not allow us to do those deeper vision goals that we are aiming towards. Sunday mornings don't allow us to do that, so we need an extra time to accomplish those goals. Do you see how that's so much different than saying, hey team, we're just gonna have worship rehearsal now? And so that's the first thing that I would say about that. You can apply that to whatever context you want to talk about, whatever team you're leading, whatever way that you're leading your church on Sunday morning, is to not just present the specific thing that you want them to do, but present the why behind it. This isn't like something unique that I'm making up. I understand it's not that groundbreaking, but that's how we do it. We present the why, and we convince people that the thing, the tangible thing that we want them to do is there to support the overall mission, the overall goal of what we are actually trying to accomplish. So I think another example would be like in your AV ministry. Let's say the volume's too loud on Sunday. I know most worship leaders don't think about that. They'd rather it be louder. But let's just say that the volume's too loud and you want them to turn the volume down. Well, you have to be able to articulate why you want them to turn the volume down. The action is to turn the volume down. That's the solution to a problem. What is the problem that we're trying to fix? So for example, maybe you're like, when we worship together, we are gathered for corporate worship, and we want to be able to hear everybody singing on Sunday morning. So when the volume is too loud, the band is the only thing that's heard, and the people cannot sing together, admonishing and exhorting and teaching each other through song because they're only hearing the band singing. I'm not saying that that's happening in your church. I'm just saying that that is how, if that was the problem that I was trying to fix, like I need to have a reason for the action being taken. It can't just be, take this action. Why are we taking the action? The other thing that I would say is that it is always, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about, like it is always more beneficial for people to discover the problem and the solution, or at the very least the problem, but the solution on their own, than it is for you to just tell them about it. And I'll use another example here of your band listening to their live stream, the live stream at your church, hearing how they sound on Sunday morning. And I'll use a very specific example of a singer being flat. So if a singer is constantly flat whenever they're singing, it is so much more beneficial for them to hear that on a live stream and say, oh my gosh, I sound horrible when I'm singing this part of the song. I'm really flat. I need to fix that. Maybe I need to take a deeper breath before that part so I have more breath support and I can hit the notes that I need to hit. As opposed to you saying, hey, background vocalist or person leading the song, you're super flat during that part. Take a deeper breath. It's so much more powerful for them to learn the problem and think about the solution ultimately on their own than for you to just throw it at them, because then they aren't as apt to receive it as they are if they would just come to the conclusion on their own. So those are the two things I would say. Number one, always talk about the why behind the decision that you're making and not just the decision that you're making, to convince people that they need to take the action that you want them to take. Number two, if possible, help them arrive at that conclusion on their own so that you don't even have to communicate it at all. How do I know what my church truly needs? We are a small, modern worship service, anywhere from 35 to 65 attendees on any given week. Our traditional service is definitely larger by some, 55 to 75. We are probably much smaller than your experience, but it's an important question to me. How do I know what music they need? We typically do 4 songs. One carryover from last week, one super well-known, gets them singing every time, one to reflect on the message of the week, and one new one to learn, which will probably be the carryover next week. Not in that order. Peggy. Well, first of all, I think your assumption that your church is much smaller than mine isn't true. I serve in a church of about 125 people, I would say, somewhere around there. So it's not like I serve in this mega church. As you can see, I'm in my church right now. My sanctuary that I'm in, I think there's like 200 chairs in here maybe. So just wanted to say that at first. But how do I know what music people need? And then you give your planning for songs. So there's 2 things that I want to address in this. We'll talk first of all about what people need to sing. And I'm wondering if you're asking this question because I feel like I often say we need to get to know our church so that we can pick songs that they need to sing. So I'm wondering if you're referencing that. So I'll come at it from that angle. And maybe you haven't heard that before, and that is the solution. How do we know what songs people need to sing? We get to know the people in our church specifically, and we think about what is going on in their lives and what truth do they need to respond to in light of their circumstances. So I think a great starting point, and if you want to do like a tangible exercise, write down the names of 5 to 10 people in your church, and then beside them, write down what life circumstances you know about them. So for instance, maybe somebody's kids just went to college and now they're empty nesters at home. Maybe another family in your church just had a kid. Maybe somebody's parent just passed away. Write all of these down and then look for common themes. Think, what truth do the people of my church need to hear in these specific circumstances? This helps put skin and bones on your set list planning, where it's not just I'm planning this arbitrary set list, but I'm planning a set list for the people of my church to respond to God in the specific circumstance in life that they're in. So think about it on an individual basis like that, but at the same time, we aren't just called to worship one-on-one with God on Sunday, but we're all worshiping together. So take it a step further. In the life of my church, what is going on in my church as a whole that we can respond to together? And if you frame your set list, your worship song planning, in that way, then you will not just be picking random songs, but you will be picking songs with the people of your church in mind. As far as your process for like picking songs, for ordering songs in your service, you say you have one carryover from the last week, one super well-known one to reflect on the message of the week, and one new one to learn. So does that mean that you're doing a new song every Sunday? I guess the one thing that you didn't tell me in your question is how long has your modern worship service existed for? I always recommend having like 40 songs in your worship set repertoire. Like that is the maximum amount of songs that I want for my worship team to have to learn, and really for my church to have to learn. I think any more than that, your church isn't going to know too many more songs than that. So if you're introducing a new song every week, then at the end of 52 weeks, you're going to have 52 new songs. And so I just want to warn you to be careful about that. I think of when I started at my church, I literally had maybe 8 songs that I did over and over again for like the first 2 or 3 months. And I ordered them differently. You know, even with 8 songs, if we do 4 songs a Sunday, that still gives me, 70 combinations of songs that I can do. See how many combinations there are, even with just 8 songs, if you're only doing 4? So let's bump that number up to 40, and we're doing 4 songs. There are 91,390 combinations of songs that you could do if you had a 40-song worship song repertoire and you did 4 songs a week. 91,390 combinations. So I say that because people introduce new songs because they're like, our church has to constantly do something new. First of all, I don't think that you have to constantly do something new, but even if you do want to do something constantly new, you can do that within the confines of 40 songs in your worship repertoire. There are 91,000 different combinations of ways that you could order that set list. So I want to warn you about introducing too many new songs. At some point, stop doing that. I don't know how far you are into how long your worship service has been around for. If your church is still learning songs, then yes, you're going to have to introduce some new songs more regularly than I recommend. But I wouldn't go over 40. Some people go more than that. It's not the end of the world, but definitely not 125 songs in your worship song repertoire, which would happen after 2 years if you introduced a new song every week. Now, if you need help not just picking songs for your worship service, but probably the harder part is learning what to say in between them, I've got something for you. It's called 5 Worship Speaking Transitions you can use this Sunday. It's a free PDF I put together. You'll find it linked in the description below. In that PDF, I'll give you 5 word-for-word speaking transitions that you can use this Sunday, but the distinction is I give them to you in a way where you can learn for yourself how to speak between songs authentically, because we aren't just memorizing a word-for-word script, we're memorizing bullet points, so you'll learn how to do them authentically. You won't have to worry about saying something unscriptural, because all of the speaking transitions that I give are based on scripture. And number 3, I find that they are the perfect length. They're like 30 seconds to 1 minute and 30 seconds, depending on where it is in your service. So check that free resource out in the description below. Check it out down in the description below. 5 worship speaking transitions that you can use this Sunday. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Till I see you in the next video. Keep leading worship well.